welcome to A Window to Bourne. I'm here today with Skip Barlow. Skip is a lifetime Bourne resident. And Skip, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's interesting to end up here being interviewed as opposed to being the interviewer. So this is going to be cool.
I know, we've seen you on Bourne TV in a different capacity. You're sort of a local star around here.
I don't know if I'm a star, but I'm from around here.
Well, let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I said you're a lifetime Bourne resident. Is that true?
Yeah. I grew up in Buzzards Bay, like a lot of people at that time.
Yeah.
It was a lot different then. You know, it really was. First day of school, I went to a one-room schoolhouse for a few days, and then they sent me to Sagamore. And, you know, I was all over the place.
What year were you born?
1948.
Okay.
So I'm kind of a baby boomer.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool, and we lived kind of on a hill about a half a mile from the bay.
From Buttermilk Bay.
From Buttermilk Bay, but between the house where I lived and grew up and the bay, there was a cranberry bog.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there was a hermit that lived out in the woods there,
like
in a real tar paper shack.
Really?
Really.
Yeah.
Lived there for years.
Wow.
You know, he was a squatter who lived out there.
Yeah.
And got to know him when I was a kid. He was a good guy. You know, but he lived the real life. He had an outhouse and actual tar paper shack, and he lived there.
Wow.
It was pretty cool.
It's hard to imagine that happening these days. I mean,
yeah, now people use plastic. You know, it is, but people still do that.
Yeah,
you don't realize it anymore. It's kind of unseen now.
Right, or like the idea of a kid hanging out in the woods with a grown man in a tar paper shack. That kind of sounds like a horror movie rather than.
Yeah, I didn't really hang out with him. I just knew him.
You just knew.
But it's funny. This guy, he had a rowboat in the bay.
Yep.
And he fished. That's how he made his living. He would go out and get quahogs or clams.
Yeah.
And he would row all around town. I mean, he didn't have a motor. He would row down to Monument Beach. Or I don't think he ever went to Katomet, but he'd row to Monument Beach and all over the different Grey Gables and Buttermilk Bay and row back. Wow. This guy lived to be over 100.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, he lived a pretty happy life.
Yeah, and he was somebody that was he known in town? I mean,
Oh yeah, he had been married and had children, and apparently whatever happened in his life changed, and he moved into a tar paper shack.
So he chose sort of the life of Walden to live
so
simply.
He didn't write about it.
Yeah,
You know?
right.
Cool.
Yeah, he's just. If he wrote the book, it would be a different story.
But I was always fascinated with him because I was always, just even as a little kid, I was into boats.
Yeah,
and the coastal habitat and stuff. And, you know, I would go to the bay every day after school.
Would you be able to just walk to Buttermilk Bay from home?
Yeah, it was a different world. The house had no locks, and I was from a big family, and as long as you were home at feeding time, you know, you were free to do whatever you wanted. We could walk downtown, or we could go out of the bay, or we could go do whatever we wanted.
Yeah.
We were supposed to go to school.
As long as you made it to school.
We were supposed to go to school. I wasn't really good at that.
Hopefully the truant officer is not still looking for you, Skip.
God, you know, I had issues with school.
Yeah.
I liked being outside.
Yep.
Still do. Still do.
I hear a lot when I've been talking to people about the past in Bourne. It seems like a common theme is that the scallops used to be so much more plentiful, and the fishing was different. I mean, what was your experience with that? Did you notice a difference between today and?
Well, it all changed in the mid '70s.
Yeah.
And at that time, that's when the grass beds really got wiped out. Without grass beds, the scallop crops diminished because scallops grow really fast compared to other shellfish. Their lifespan is 1.5 years. I don't want to really get too much into shellfish, but and eelgrass grew about this tall.
Yeah.
You know, about 3 feet tall, and eelgrass, when scallops spawn, they would cling to the eelgrass, the spat.
Yeah.
So they would be, one stalk of grass might have 11 or 12 scallops on it.
Oh,
one
wow.
stalk of grass.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow.
And they'd live the first, you know, they had like a bicycle thread they attached to grass, and they'd hang on to that grass for the first probably 6 months of their life before they'd fall off and go to the bottom.
Yep.
Then they'd, you know, grow out for the next year. But without the grass,
There's no nursery for the scallops.
a lot of the nursery is gone. They still cling to rocks and things, but the main nursery is gone.
Yeah.
For scallops. Those scallops, and there were millions and millions and millions of scallops.
Yeah.
They would all eat. So they would eat the nutrients.
Okay.
So once the grass is gone and the scallops are gone, you automatically get more nutrients.
Right, which is an algae bloom.
Yeah,
or, yeah.
There's a huge algae bloom going on right now. People don't know it. I mean, there's a winter bloom in Katomet that the algae is like cotton candy in the water. It's probably 2 inches off the bottom.
Yeah.
When that algae dies and decays, it uses up all the oxygen in the water at that level.
Yep, yep.
So if there's juvenile quahogs or juvenile scallops, or oysters not so much because the way oysters are shaped, they actually get above the bottom when they feed.
Okay. Yeah,
but
yeah.
Clams and scallops and basic clams and quahogs really. When they don't live too long without oxygen, they're kind of like us.
Right.
They need dissolved oxygen.
Right.
So that first time when you have a bloom and it dies, if there's juvenile shellfish there, especially juvenile shellfish, because juvenile shellfish are like juvenile people. They really, really move a lot. If you look at them under an electron microscope, they really, really, really move a lot. They're very active.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if you kill them, they're not there to eat the nutrients anymore either.
Right, right.
And we have wiped out whole year classes many times.
And do we know what happened with the eelgrass? I know, it's not...
Well, this discussion's going from where I wanted it to go to it, an environmental discussion. But what happened was in the late 60s, early 70s, the government really got into promoting sewer plants. The perception at the time was, we're going to make the coast better by everybody tying into these sewer lines, and the sewer all be processed in one place. Yeah. And then the remnants would be dumped into the coastal habitat. But they don't remove nutrients.
Okay, okay.
So
too much nitrogen going into the...
Yeah, at one time. Yeah. And then if it rains or you have a bad storm, they just dump the sewer plants. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, yeah.
They do that. And then all the pumping stations, if they break down, they're all set up to dump.
Wow.
So now instead of filtering through the ground and coming in a little bit at a time on a regular rate.
Yep, it just washes in.
It comes in all at once. You get a huge bloom, and then, it kills everything.
Right, right.
And you get these excessive algae blooms. The first thing they did was they'd be in the water, they'd coat the strands of grass.
The algae would.
The algae would.
And so the scallops or the juvenile shellfish.
The juvenile shellfish couldn't stick to them, but the grass itself would be dying. It's just like your grass in the yard.
Yeah.
If you kept coating it,
right,
it would keep getting longer to get the sunlight that it needs.
Yeah, yeah.
And it wouldn't develop a good root system.
Yep.
And then the first winter comes.
Right.
And when the ice goes down and the grass freezes the ice, when the tide comes, it lifts up, it pulls it right out. So it's out. Roots and all comes right out. It doesn't break off. It's gone. Yeah. And then as long as this algae blooms.
Wow. And the amazing thing is, we've seen such a change just in one person's lifetime. I mean, and that's been such a common theme.
Oh, yeah.
Is, the difference in the ecology as I've been talking to people. With the fact that the wildlife used to be so much more abundant, particularly the shellfish used to be more abundant. Yes, but I don't want to get too far off track with that topic.
That's okay. That became a passion in my life.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
I was a fisherman at the time. I saw the change. I bought my first commercial license in 1962. So by the mid 70s, I had been fishing for a while. Yeah. I saw this change. We went to town hall. We were really upset. There was a lot of fishermen in town at the time. The selectmen at the time, I think it was Bob Parody and Barry Johnson and Bob Kilduff. They could see there was a huge economic impact on the town. Yeah. Barry Johnson was on the County Shellfish Advisory Committee at the time. He came back with a couple of ideas for us to try and just survive. Mm-hmm. One of them was subtidal clamming, which is, everybody knows that clams grow on the beach, but most people think they don't grow out in the ocean. So we all thought he was nuts. Yeah. Honest to God, he came back and said this, but we tried it, and it actually turned out to be very successful. Okay. Yeah. And a lot of these families kept in the fishery doing that rather than scalloping. But we couldn't do anything to bring the grass beds back. They would die in like crazy. Yeah. Yeah. And we were involved in this. We got involved with Woods Hole to study, figure it out. By the time they actually began to study, about 80% of the grass beds were gone. Oh, wow. And now they try to say where the grass beds were,
Yeah, yeah.
And they don't even know, and we know they were everywhere. I mean, they don't call, you know, where you live up around Eel Pond.
Eel Pond, I know, yeah.
Because, you know, Eel Pond had a lot of eelgrass.
Yeah.
And a lot of eels.
Yeah. It's coming back. I mean, it is slowly reestablishing itself, but it feels like just inches
Very
a
slowly.
year. Yeah.
Very slowly.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the big picture, what you see coming back is about 0.5%.
Yep, yep.
That's really not a lot. It's not. And then other places, I still see it diminishing.
What can people do today to you know, not contribute to the further demise, or to help the shell fisheries come back?
Help the shell fisheries come back?
Yeah.
The scallop fishery, you really need the grass.
Mm-hmm.
The quahog and the clam fishery and the oyster fishery. When we bring in the county dredge, which is a big hydraulic dredge, that actually turns it, but we get big sets of shellfish right behind that every time. When we had hydraulic clamming in town, which is still legal, but nobody does it, that brought back the fishery. You know, we documented that over a 15-year period. We did a study, documented significant increase from just huge. But it was a social issue because it was noisy, noisy.
Right.
And it was a social problem. It really wasn't anything else. It was, and of course, it's always about, you know, not in my backyard thing.
Yeah. Well, and there's the tension even with the eelgrass. You know, there's people want a sandy beach in front of their house instead of something that looks like a marsh or the sharp grass.
Yeah.
So there is that tension between the way we want to use the ocean for recreation or just to look beautiful and you know, keeping it healthy.
Yeah, it's funny. Back in the 70s, and I was on the town recovery team, the dive team to recover bodies. And most of the town, you couldn't run an outboard at low tide. The grass was so thick. It was really difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
And I want to get on something I heard Parody say today. I want to explain something to you. But at that time, because you couldn't move around, the town had a big duck. It's parked down at the center now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like the big military.
That was a town rescue vehicle.
Okay.
And that vehicle, because it had tires and a propeller, could go just about anywhere in this town at low tide.
Oh, wow.
You know, and they'd go out on the Masney Flats. They'd go anywhere because when the propeller would get fouled, they put the tires in gear, and that thing would keep going.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and we used to use that as an underwater recovery vehicle, and it was, you know, came from World War II, but it was effective.
Wow.
But of course, once the grass beds are gone, now they can go anywhere with an outboard, so they don't need it anymore, and it sits there.
Yeah,
It's part of the military museum.
Right, right, right.
But
Captain's interested in what we're saying here. He's an ocean dog, loves the beach himself.
and another big problem in the coastal habitat, because I'm not supposed to be going there. We're supposed to be doing another show. But and Bob Parody mentioned it.
Yeah.
You know, he would wake up in the morning in Monument Beach, and it would sound like a bunch of chainsaws out on the water. That was really loud in the morning. And that's because outboard motors back in the 50s and 60s exhausted into the air. They didn't have a through hub exhaust.
Yeah.
And the exhaust went into the air rather than water.
Okay.
Well, and that was good because, you know, they were loud, but they weren't polluting the water. But now the exhaust from an outboard motor, it goes through the propeller and it's homogenized into the water column.
Yeah.
In other words, and I was watching this Saturday because it's something that really bothers me. When the exhaust comes out of the outboard and hits the cold water, when I'm scalloping on Saturday, you know, no smoke, very few bubbles come up behind me in the wake.
Right.
They get churned
It's
right
going
into the water
somewhere.
column.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, when it cools, it ends up in the water column. And another reason that we have low dissolved oxygen is the outboard motors and the proliferation of them all over the country. And people say, oh yeah, well they're fuel injected now.
So they seem
and
cleaner.
They mix oil, they seem cleaner.
Yeah.
But if you put it in a freshwater tank and put some fish in there, or a saltwater tank, and you start that motor up and you put it in gear and you homogenize the exhaust into the water, it doesn't take long, you kill all the fish.
Right, right, right.
And we actually did a video on this, and if you start an outboard motor up out of the water, you can't imagine how much smoke and exhaust actually comes out of it that you never see when it's driven into the water column. It just, it's a big, huge problem.
Yeah.
And prior to the introduction of that through hub exhaust, and that was in the 70s also, we had huge you know, the environment was so different.
Right, right, right.
And they'll have to address that someday. Someday they're going to have to exhaust outboards back into the air and put converters, catalytic converters or whatever on them. But
well, and it seems like the key is to have, now that we have the awareness, we sort of, a lot of these changes and, the changes in the way that the stormwater was flowing into the ocean, I mean, those decisions were made before we were aware what the changes would produce. So now that we're aware, we at least have the tools to make better decisions in the future.
But we don't have the money to fix it.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, particularly now they're talking about just the Wareham plant. I visited I really care about the coastal habitat, and I go check these places out. And I've been to the sewer plant in Wareham, and they do nutrient removal, but they don't remove medical waste.
Oh.
And that one's hooked into Toby Hospital, a lot of nursing homes, and the medical waste also has a huge impact on the coastal habitat. And the more you tie into that and dump it in the coastal habitat, the worse it is.
Yep, yep.
You only have to kill something once and it's not there to consume the nutrients anymore.
Right,
but
right.
It's a whole...
And it throws the whole system out of balance.
Yeah, and you take one biologist out of Woods Hole and they pick one thing and study that. And that...
Yeah. I'm interested in how you got so involved with all of this information and these details.
How?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was a fisherman.
I mean, you say you didn't like school, but you seem so knowledgeable, and it seems like you've really studied this.
I've really had the benefit of working with a lot of different scientists from the state and from Woods Hole, because I was involved and I cared about it and I wanted to find the answers because I didn't want to see the coastal habitat die. I love it. I do. I spent as much as 40 hours a week underwater diving, just making a living, but it's just such a cool place.
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds stupid, but it is.
Yep.
It's quiet, it's peaceful, and I liked it, and nobody bothers you.
Right.
But it was good, and I raised my kids in it, and and my father, and for generations, my family's been involved with the ocean, the seas.
Yep, and in the town of Bourne. I mean, the name Barlow.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. We have. It's all over the town. And how far back does your family go?
Quite a ways. We're not Native Americans, but we go back to the mid 1600s, early 1600s.
Yep.
It was kind of notorious. We're not. The reason that family and my family is remembered so well is not because we were good people. We were just controversial people.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've never been afraid of controversy, and I've never been afraid to say what I feel, and it's gotten me in trouble a couple times, at least.
What controversy in the 1600s is probably different than controversy today, or were they a lot of the same struggles?
It was funny. It's not funny, really. There was this guy, George Barlow, who had been a lawyer, and he'd been a preacher, and he was a really good drinker. That's what he was. He was a drinker, so he was preaching. He came to this area, and then he went up to Exeter, Maine, and Wells. He was up there. That was part of Massachusetts Bay Colony at the time, and he was a preacher, but he was a drinker.
Yeah.
And he was banned from preaching because of his drinking.
So, yep.
Somebody took him to court because he said something they didn't like. So then he was sent back down here because he had a law background also. He went back to Plymouth, and he became the marshal in Sandwich.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And his duty at the time was to drive the Quakers out of Sandwich. And he was a wicked drinker. First he had to figure out who they were.
Yeah.
So he hung out at Newcomb's Tavern down there and did a lot of drinking and a lot of talking and trying to figure out who the Quakers were. And when he knew, he was just really evil.
Wow.
He was evil. He did things like he went and took their cattle to try and make them leave, and they wouldn't leave, and he just was horrible to them.
I mean, and was it just a religious intolerance? What was wrong with the Quakers?
Well, the Quakers weren't. The Pilgrims came here for religious reasons, and they wanted to be whatever they wanted to be, and the Quakers weren't acceptable to the colony of Plymouth. So, and the colony of Plymouth, of course, was growing in the early 1600s, and they didn't want the Quakers. The Quakers ended up, most of them, going to Rhode Island, but the ones in Sandwich, they weren't going nowhere. And George kind of deteriorated to the point that he started cutting off their ears so everybody knew that, yeah, that was really bad.
Wow.
I mean,
wow.
That was how much it deteriorated.
Yeah. I have to say, I was joking that the problems would have been different in the 1600s than they are today, but actually it sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it's social problems.
Yeah,
it's
social problems, new groups coming in,
right.
and the old, the people who, with the old group not resisting anybody who's not like us. Wow. So it's like there's nothing new under the sun in terms of.
There really isn't.
Yeah.
It really takes a change of heart to realize that we're all just mortals.
Right.
I mean,
right.
we are, and we all have a spirit. I'm not going there, but I'm going there. We all have this spirit within us that we take it for granted that everything that happens, that we move our hands, that we feel hot, we feel cold. I mean, if you take the time to perceive everything that's going on and realize that there's something in you that makes this happen, there's something within you besides your body that's there. I mean, there really is. There's this spirit within you that, I'm one of the very few people that have had an opportunity to have an experience that made me realize that the spirit doesn't die when your body dies. It's stupid, and I don't want to get into this.
Are you sure?
I am,
okay.
But I'm just telling you. So that's a perception, and once you realize your mortality, and once you realize that you're really not that significant in this world.
Right.
You're really not. And I'm not being smart, but you can make everything around you peaceful and comfortable and nice, and really enjoy your surroundings and be thankful for everything. I mean, sometimes you're cold and you think, wow, I'm really cold, and you feel bad. But if you're really cold sometimes and you're out there at night and you look up at the stars and you look at the sky, you might be cold, but it's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, Diane and I were doing it last night. We were down at Scussett Beach. It was cold. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It really was. Those kinds of things people don't. I don't think people get it. I get it because I live in it, and I lived.
And we live in a pretty special place where there's opportunities just to wonder and marvel at the beauty of nature.
But I'm sure that even
world.
like you went to the mountains this weekend.
Yep.
If you forget everything that's around you and just think about what's there, and it's really kind of like heaven.
Yeah.
It really is, and we're having this opportunity to enjoy this whole big picture of this world that's around us. And a lot of us get so involved in the minutia of day-to-day crap, so to speak, that we don't realize what the big picture is and how much. It's not about money, and it's not about. It's just about, wow, this place is pretty cool.
Yeah.
We're pretty lucky to be here, even for the little minute bit of time that we'll be here.
Yeah.
And even time, that's something we created.
Right. Wow.
Weird.
You really give me something to think about.
I'm sorry.
That's amazing.
I'm not trying to, but it's, and everybody has their passion.
Yeah.
And my passion happened to be the coastal habitat. So in order to try and find the answers that I needed, I would go to play. I wasn't afraid to go to Woods Hole and ask questions. I wasn't afraid if they said, well, if you think that way, would you support a study? Yeah, let's go.
Yep.
And no funding or anything. Let's just do it.
Yep.
And that was how I got to know a lot of different people in the state and in the federal government, and I listened to a lot of thoughts that it goes all over the place. There's a lot of thoughts about sewerage. There's a lot of thoughts about the coastal habitat. Some people think that people believe that what they're doing is making things better. I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah, let me hear about that.
In the late 70s, the federal government found out that they were polluting a pond down in Falmouth because they were using all the sewage on the basin and putting it through their plant, and it was up along into a pond. It was killing the pond.
Yeah.
I said, oh, this is horrible. So they piped the sewage 9.5 miles so it leaches in to the canal over here by the skating rink.
Oh, wow.
At that time, that was a good solution.
Right, because it seemed like the ocean is so enormous. It would,
But it didn't take long, and they realized it wasn't a good idea. But they still stand behind that idea, and they still do it because there's nothing else to do with it.
Yeah.
And they don't do nutrient removal either. And that's the federal government who's demanding that everybody does it, but they don't do it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so you see these things and you go, what the hell?
Right, right, right.
You know, so you just try to do what you can do.
You have your own, yeah, you have just the little bit that you can do for the short time that you're here.
And,
yeah.
and, you know, I've been on the Board of Health like for 20 years, and we do have a lot of people put in nutrient removal systems all over town because you're trying to make it better. But there's so many, you know, like the problem with the outboard, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable that you really, it's hard to get through to people about that.
How do you, what prevents you from just throwing your hands up and giving up? I mean, you know, it can feel overwhelming.
I'm a pain in the ass. It's not, you know, I just don't give up. And of course, Diane, who's my other half, she doesn't give up either. And we when we get involved in something, and we're very involved in different things, in the Historic Society right now, we follow through. We get frustrated.
Yep.
No different than anybody else. But we hang in there.
Yep.
And I've tried, you can't imagine how many different angles I've come at problems.
Right.
To try and find a solution.
And then
I don't always find a solution, but I'm not afraid to change my course and try another
again.
tack.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you know, that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't mention at the beginning of the show that you are the current president of the Bourne Historical Society.
Yeah, I am.
And so, you know, assisting and maintaining, protecting, preserving, and presenting the history of Bourne through that channel as well. So, so you're quite a part of our history and a part of the present moment of the town.
I'm fortunate to have. I've got a really good board, and I've always been lucky to have a real good group of people who support different things that I do and I do right now. And it's just that's why things work. Is if you get in with a good group of people who are all willing to help, you can get things done.
Yeah.
You know?
What's happening next with the town or with the Historic Society?
Well, the Historic Society, we're putting up a pavilion there so we can have weddings and maybe class reunions, family reunions.
Yep.
And, you know, small, not middle-sized events, not big events, but middle-sized. There's good parking there. There's, it's right on the canal. What's better than that?
Right at the Uptuxet Trading Post. Yeah.
You know, and of course we have restrooms. So it's going to be a nice facility on the side of the bridge.
Would that be available this summer? I mean, is that something that people could start looking for?
We're really working to get it done for this summer.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a pretty mild winter, so we've got a lot of work done, and I think we're going to make it. Our building and grounds superintendent, Ted Ellis, he's pretty confident that we're going to make it, and because he's so optimistic, we're working really hard at it. And,
well, that's a pretty special spot at Tuxet, and it's nice that it's you're working to make it even more accessible to more people in town.
Yeah, we've done a lot there in the last few years. And, you know, that the potential is unlimited. You know, I mean, it's nice to have music in the park on the Bourne Buzzards Bay side of the bridge, but it's hard to get there. The library has had music, but they're not on the canal. We've got everything, and of course, their funding issues.
And you can't take a train over the bridge for a dime like you used to be able to in the 50s anymore. So.
No, or just run across it and not pay nothing.
Right.
You know, it was just.
Well, Skip, I just want to thank you so much for joining me today and for joining us as we took this little glimpse through the window to the past of Bourne. And thanks for sharing your specific perspective on
I enjoy it, and thank you for having me. Thank you, and I hope I didn't bore you to death.
No, you're fantastic. I really, I think we're going to have you back, actually. I think we just scratched the surface.
Anytime, but
Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.